Welcome back. Welcome to episode 6. So we are doing kind of our wrap of where we've been in episode 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We're going to bring all this to a beautiful crescendo. We're going to talk about from the definition all the way to how it became a defining moment and how that molded my sense of self. So you won't want to miss as we bring this series to a close. Episode 6 is on the rise. So you and I have had quite the journey. We've gone from what in the world did I mean by a core message, right? We've talked about that conveyed very deep impression that messages have left us. And remember, those messages weren't always spoken. Sometimes it was a silent message. Sometimes it was something we wanted to have spoken that wasn't spoken. So sometimes it was the absence of an affirmation or encouragement, and that became a message unto itself. So we talked about the sources of messages. We understood there was a familial, there was cultural. Sometimes there's these beautiful sacred messages, which is where I want you to begin to draw your true sense of self and your self-identity from. Then we looked at what we talked about as a felt sense, right? So how do these messages kind of emboss in us? How do we begin to interpret a message, right? Because we said it's not verbal. It's not just based on what's spoken. It's based on what's felt, right? So we talked about feeling versus facts, that the facts could be really different, but the feeling is what I'm motivated by. The feeling is how the file is saved. The feeling is how the file is stored. The feeling is how the file becomes a script. The feeling is how the file becomes the self-talk. And then ultimately how it begins to shape my sense of self. Why is that a big deal? Because my sense of self is the underlying premise, the foundation from which all behavior arises. We say it this way. My sense of self acts as the blueprint. Everything else is simply a construct. You cannot change the construct until you go to the blueprint, right? So we talked about how we can rewrite our story, but we can't do it with a false narrative. We cannot do it from a place of what they have said. We can't build this beautiful new lived experience, rewriting our story without limitation, with all of the indirect, right? The indirect knowings that have informed me of what I think I am, what I think I know about myself, what I believe about myself. Remember, those are all indirect. They're secondhand. What I'm encouraging you to do is kind of do like Jacob. I want you to disassociate from all the things you believe confirm your idea of you, from all the things that you personify, that you embody, right? I have to be this, I have to do that, I have to show up like this because they believe I'm that. I want you to put all of that to rest. And I want you to realize that there is a sacred self. That part of you that cannot be created by someone else, cannot be tarnished or diminished. That's the part of you that has exceptional value, and that value never changes. Where does that come from? It comes because God said, I made you in my image and I made you after my likeness. So the source file for your identity isn't maternal. It's not paternal. It's not based on DNA, right? It's based on who God says you are. And when we really come into the knowing of that, it changes everything. But if you don't think these messages are important, look at like Gideon. The story goes from him saying, hey, I'm the least, my family is the least of all the clans. And then he moves into how he really personalizes that. And he makes the statement, I am the least. Right. So he moves from talking about something a little larger in scope to really identifying himself as the least. Right. We see the same thing with the children of Israel as they're moving through the wilderness to go into the promised land. Their idea of themselves is that they are small, incapable, insignificant. Why? Because they see themselves as grasshoppers. Does that affect their lived experience? You better believe it does. Can they inherit the promise? They cannot. Not because God doesn't have it, but because they can't see themselves accurately. They can't see themselves clearly, right? So when you look at like Moses heard a message from, I would venture to say, one of the Hebrewites, right? When he rose up and slew the Egyptian, and he said, who made you ruler over us, right? Now listen, that message went somewhere, because when God comes to get Moses, what does he say? Nobody's going to listen to me. I can't lead anybody. Nobody's going to follow me, right? But where does that come from? It comes from a message he heard that has put him on the sidelines of life, positioned him on the backside of a desert, because his sense of self was so impacted, maybe it's a powerful word, by somebody else's opinion of him, right? So the story goes on. We could take a David, we could take a Jacob, and the story of Esau. I mean, there's so many game-playing case studies that are just within the Bible for us to look at. But I want you to see your own case study. I want you to use your own story, and I want you to see that the only way out of this is to know who you really are. The only way to be authentic is to know your true self. It cannot exist in any other version. So you got work to do, right? We got beautiful work to do in unconnecting and unhinging ourselves from all of these ideas, all these false philosophies of myself, and really beginning to sit and center myself, right? And anchor myself in the truth. Who did that? Jesus did that. When the Father said in Matthew 3, "You are my son in whom I am well pleased," it was never up for negotiation. There was no debate about it. He fully received the message. Now you're talking about a core message. And think, out of that message, he did the most amazing things. Out of that message, he understood the sacredness of his true self. And out of that message, was he significant? You better believe he was significant. And he brought significance in every place he was. So that's the plan. It's been a thrill to hang out with you. Listen, we're going to be talking more about in the future the hierarchy of beliefs. Messages move from just a mere message. They go deeper in the framework of who we are and they become a belief. And there are hierarchies to belief, which is sometimes the reason why we can't get liftoff and change, because we're approaching it from the wrong level of the belief system. So we're going to talk about that in the upcoming series. Look for it. You won't want to miss it. Listen, thank you for hanging out with me for this entire series. I've been Dr. Veronica, hanging out with you as we talked about messages that mold and move us. I'm out. See you next time.